Good morning to all. Welcome to online video class. Firstly, I introduce myself. I Sheikh Amin Mohi, Assistant Professor of Anatomy at Sakina Women's Medical College, Jashore. Today, I am going to talk on development of urethra. But before starting the development of urethra, we have to know some gross features on urethra. Urethra is a muscular tube, and in case of male it is 18 to 22 centimeter in long, but in case of female it is very short and it is only 4 centimeter. And the urethra extend from internal urethral orifice to the external urethral orifice. Male urethra is divided into 3 parts. One is the prostatic part, membranous part, and spongy or penile part of the urethra. The prostatic part of the urethra, it passes through the prostate gland, and the membranous part of the urethra, it passes through the deep perineal pouch, and spongy part or penile part of urethra, it passes through the corpus spongiosum of the penis. The male external urethral orifice, it opens into the tip of the glans penis, but female external urethral orifice, it opens into the vestibule of the vagina close to the vaginal orifice. Now, we are starting on development of urethra. We know that the endodermal cloaca is divided into 2 parts. One is the anterior primitive urogenital sinus and the posterior anorectal canal. The primitive urogenital sinus, by the entrance of the mesonephric duct, it is divided into upper part which is known as vesicourethral canal and the lower part which is known as the definitive urogenital sinus. The upper part of the vesicourethral canal, it expands more rapidly and forms the urinary bladder, and the lower part of the vesicourethral canal, it remains narrowed or constricted, which is known as the primitive urethra. The definitive urogenital sinus, it again divided into 2 parts, the upper pelvic part and the lower dilated part which is known as the phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus. Now, this is the female urethra. The development of the male and female urethra is quite different, it is not same. The whole of the female urethra except the terminal portion is derived from the primitive urethra. Primitive urethra, here I represent it into black dot. So, this black dot is nothing, it is the primitive urethra, and maximum portion of the female urethra is derived from the primitive urethra. And the terminal portion of the female urethra, here I represent it into red dot. That red dot is nothing, it is the pelvic part of the definitive urogenital sinus. So, the terminal part of the female urethra is derived from the pelvic part of the definitive urogenital sinus. Now, the development of the male urethra. In the posterior wall of the prostatic part of the male urethra, there is a longitudinal ridge which is known as urethral crest, and within the urethral crest there is a depression which is known as prostatic utricle, and on either side of the prostatic utricle there is the opening of the ejaculatory duct. So, the prostatic part of the urethra up to the opening of the ejaculatory duct, it derived from the primitive urethra which is represented by the black dot, and the lower part of the prostatic urethra below the ejaculatory duct, and also the membranous part of the male urethra is derived from the pelvic part of the definitive urogenital sinus. The spongy part of the male urethra is derived from the phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, and the phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, I represent it into black dot. So, the spongy part is derived from the phallic part of definitive urogenital sinus up to the navicular fossa. Look very carefully, the penis externally it is surrounded by the surface ectoderm. That surface ectoderm invaginate into the spongy part of the urethra, and by the invagination of the surface ectoderm, the most terminal part of the male urethra below the or anterior to the navicular fossa is derived from the surface ectoderm. So, ultimately the prostatic part of the male urethra up to the opening of ejaculatory duct is derived from the primitive urethra. The lower part of the prostatic urethra below the ejaculatory duct, also the membranous part of the urethra is derived from the pelvic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, and the spongy part of the urethra up to the navicular fossa is derived from the phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, and the terminal part of the urethra anterior to the navicular fossa is derived from the invagination of the surface ectoderm. So, ultimately that phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, it contribute to the formation of the spongy or penile part of male urethra, but it does not contribute to the formation of the female urethra. This phallic part of the definitive urogenital sinus, it forms the vestibule of the vagina. So, that is all about the development of urethra. Thank you so much.